Street Smart Sales. Street Smart Sales.
So, with every relationship, even the great ones, right? Uh, you tend to find yourself in this space where everything's going great. You two or the group of you, in some instances, everybody's on the same page. All have a common goal, all moving towards that goal. But every now and then it is inevitable that someone may feel a little differently, or someone's perspective um, may be either skewed or misinformed, or maybe there was a lack of miscommunication somewhere. And that is literally in every genre of relationship, if you will, if we want to use business lingo with this. And having that top tier level of emotional intelligence in those spaces, along with communication skills, um, and a bunch of other fancy words that we'll save for later. But, um, today, what we're going to talk about is how to navigate and remain progressive in situations where a client that you're working with, or potential client for that matter, if you're doing some type of free trial or some type of barter arrangement before you guys actually start pulling out credit cards and putting in information, we want to talk about those situations where maybe there was an agreement or a mutual understanding, or one of those things that maybe both sides took for granted should happen, even though it wasn't confirmed. In any of those instances, they fall under the same umbrella, and they happen quite often and will happen, even if you consider yourself an excellent communicator. So, we want to talk about how to navigate some of those pitfalls, those roadblocks, those speed bumps, if you will, and exactly how to remain positive and get the outcome that you need from your client so that it doesn't affect your business in the long term. So, Brian, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to you, man. Of course, when it comes to sales, in any regard, you're going to have a lot of objections, right? So, I would say that you're probably going to be the master of overcoming those objections, especially with you being a year in business for yourself and having so many clients at such a rapid rate. People might see like, oh, Brian has had, close to 100 clients in less than a year's time. Well, how many no's did Brian get to? And how much flack
Mhm.
has Brian also got, not only over this past year, but maybe in years past. And so have I,
Yeah.
and so have the people listening to this call.
Mhm.
You who's listening to this podcast, you may be going through the same thing now, or you have somebody who signed up and now they're trying to lower the price and want all this free stuff. But anyway, I'm gonna mute myself for the moment, give Brian the mic, man, and just kind of run us through your perspective on this and some things that would help the listeners and viewers today.
Yeah, I think first off, thank you, JB. I think the biggest thing to remember is we're all people. Everybody's a human. Everybody goes through good things, bad things, in between stuff that's not amazing or terrible. It just is what it is. In my sales career, I've been in sales in one way, shape, or form for it's been like over 18 years now. We're going on close enough to 2 decades. Um, One thing I've realized is that when a customer gives me an objection or a prospect gives me an objection, whether it's a time objection where they're just too busy to implement the solution, or a money objection where they think my product or service is too expensive, they can't afford it, what have you. I need to ask my husband, ask my wife, my girlfriend, my grandpa, whatever. Or now's not the right time. There's a few core objections that you'll always hear, and it tends to be those same ones say in that same vein, right? Um, I just try to remember honestly that the worst thing I can do being on this side of the table is react in that moment. I need to take a minute to really listen to what that human being is telling me. Pick up on their verbal signals, their buying signals, their body language, their tonality, all of it. Analyze that, process it, be quiet for a moment. Let them finish talking. If I give them enough space to do that, 9 times out of 10, what most people will do is if you actively are listening and remain quiet and hold them that space to be able to really explain themselves, they will tell you all the details because you're allowing them to. You're not trying to cut them off and hurry up and overcome the objection or hurry up and shove what you think is the solution to their problems down the throat. It's not what anybody wants, by the way. And yet that's what we all are instinctually wanting to do. Want to hurry up and solve the problem. Don't do that. Give them a minute. Typically, from what I've seen, about 90 to 95% of the time, sometimes more, the first objection they give you, whether it's, oh, they're not happy with the progress of what's going on here, or this is out of my price range. Why do you charge so much? I'm really busy. I can't implement this right now. That is like the tip of the iceberg issue. It's not the real issue. They haven't told you the real issue and what the actual issue is because they don't feel comfortable enough to tell you what the real issue is. Because you haven't earned their trust yet. That's what's going on. When a girl tells you she's not interested in going out with you, there's more to it than just that. If you would allow her to explain, she will. But she doesn't feel comfortable that you can actually handle the truth. It might not be that she's not just physically attracted to you. She might be very physically attracted to you. However, her mom might have just recently got diagnosed with cancer. And the last thing she's thinking about right now is dating somebody. She wants to take care of her mom. You wouldn't know that because you didn't ask. And you're not going to know that until you give her the space to say what's really going on. She might have just lost her job. She might not be in a very good headspace to date. She, especially depending on how she's doing financially, she might be in a dire situation to find a new job as quickly as possible. And she doesn't want to, quote unquote, waste her time getting to know somebody and dating somebody when finding a new job is a much higher priority. This is not the right time for going on a date with you. Might not be the right time for the next 6-7 months. But she leaves it at, oh, I'm not interested. Because it's easier that way. And then hopefully you'll leave her alone and you'll go away, like most people will do. They'll just leave it at that. Okay, she's not into me. I must not be her type. All right. I guess I'll just go off in my own direction. So taking a minute, collecting your thoughts, collecting your emotions, right? Because we're all emotional creatures. Lord knows I am too, especially me. Don't make the situation worse. Don't become combative. Don't ask yes or no questions. Don't ask questions that are going to put the prospect or the client on the defensive. Collect your thoughts. Ask questions that will help you understand the situation. Like, you're saying, okay, it's a lot of money. It's out of your budget. What do you mean by that? What do you feel like it's expensive compared to? Compared to other copywriters you've talked to? Other sales trainers? I'm not really understanding. Can you help me fill in some knowledge gaps there that clearly I have? Oh, other copywriters. Well, you're the only copywriter I've talked to. Oh, that's interesting. Well, then what's making you feel like I'm charging too much? Just curious, because you haven't interviewed anybody else, that does this type of work. Have you ever done this type of work? If so, when? Have you ever hired someone else to do this type of work? If so, when was that? What did they charge? Oh, 15 years ago, you hired someone to do some email marketing for you? Yeah. Different situation back then, dude. You know what I mean? So, and I'm not asking that to be funny. I'm not asking that to put them on the defensive. I'm not asking that to make them feel dumb or silly or uneducated or ignorant or any of that. I am asking those questions so I can understand. Because if I don't ask, I won't learn. And I ask it in I like to think, a very polite and thoughtful way. A curious tone is what I use typically when I'm asking questions like that. I don't want them to feel like they're in some sort of like CIA black site location where they're getting interrogated. That's not what we want here, right? I shouldn't have to fight you to get you to want to work with me. And at the end of the day, I have learned that the customers that were the angriest towards me for whatever reason, they weren't actually angry with me. I wasn't the problem. They were dealing with some crazy stuff in their own life. And they finally hit a breaking point and they couldn't control their frustration, their sadness anymore. And now, because I'm talking to them and we're dealing with a negative situation with my company, or my product not working up to their expectations, or them being mischarged on a bill. This happened a few times when I used to work at other companies. They got invoiced incorrectly or whatever. Um, Now they're taking it out on me. So seeking to understand and not just assuming that they're this horrible person, because most people aren't. Most people are really good people if you just give them a chance to be, you know.
No, definitely. And I think too, um, you know, as I'm as I'm making a reference to people that I've worked with, and I say it just about on every podcast we have. I have a very huge reference in the athletic fitness performance space. And when it comes to those people who they want to make a change and they see that what you have is of value. So they're not in flux about that. They're not conflicted about that. Um, Typically, and I use this word and this term very loosely for the sake of time, what they're typically insecure about is their own knowledge base and
Mm,
their own ability to follow through.
mm,
So it's almost like from the client's perspective. And at
mm,
some point, we've all been a client,
mhm,
and we're typically more and the most comfortable with things we understand.
yep.
So, a lot of times when you're dealing with a client who seems like maybe they see the value in it, but the price point is too high, so they immediately have this paradigm shift of from investment to cost,
Yep.
or they know that you know what you're talking about, but they don't quite understand what you're saying, even
Right.
though you're not necessarily talking over their head and you're making it all make sense. But since it's new, they may still be a little bit uncomfortable with the
Mm,
process of it because they don't really fully understand what's going on.
mm,
So, my recommendation for people who are listening, along with what Brian has expressed to us also, because the real thing and what Brian has touched on is that it's typically something else. And it's typically something deeper that they have an issue with. Um, the number one thing that you can do in that situation is first know that you can't control that emotion in people, which is why Brian and I talk all the time, right? And Brian hits home on it a lot, is that sometimes people are just not a good fit, you
yep.
know? Sometimes people are just not a good fit, or maybe they are a good fit, but they're just not ready. And
Mm,
that happens a lot. And again, every style of relationship, you may meet somebody who's great and you see all these great qualities in them. And for some reason, they just can't really calibrate and get on the same page with, the program at hand or the task at
mm,
hand, right?
yep. Yep.
And another good quote that I've heard recently. I don't know who the quote is from. You can Google it once you hear me say it here. Um, but most times, especially in business to client relationship, or even peer to peer relationship, is the potential that we see in someone is not actually true. What we're seeing is a projection of what we would do if we were in their position.
Mm,
So I say that big philosophical thing as a business owner to
mm,
remind ourselves that what we would anticipate that the client would understand and be comfortable with, and we spell it all out for them, and we tell them that it's completely done for you. You're just going to get updates. You don't have to lift a finger. I may need some information from you sometimes, but for the most part, the ball is in your court, and I'm of service to you. So
Mhm.
from our perspective, it's like, why would this client be upset? Why would they be abrasive? Why would they have all this rebuttal? Why would they feel like we're not moving fast enough on this project, or things are off track somehow, or they want to question the investment that's been made, right? Because we're looking at it from the perspective of, man, based on what I understand, if I were
Right,
you,
right.
you
But you're
know,
not them.
right. Exactly. And and
Not
and
them.
vice versa.
Right,
So just from a mental perspective as a business owner, understand that about every single client that you're working with, because here's the bottom line, here's the root. If they knew exactly what you knew and knew how to do it the way that you knew how to do it, they wouldn't need your help.
they
So
just do
you
it themselves, man.
yeah, they would just
Yeah.
do it themselves. So you almost have to look at clients again, for a lack of a better way to say this, due to time, you almost have to look at them as children, as
Yep,
babies. They don't
yep,
know. They don't know any better. And
yep,
and when you're dealing with a child or a baby, when you try to do something, you know it's good for them, and they start throwing a fit,
yep,
you're like,
yep,
dude, like if I was you, I would just lay there and get my diaper change and let me just get this out the way so you can go back to doing Lego stuff. Like it's
right,
easy, right?
right.
But
What are
that
you doing, dude?
right.
What
But
is going on
but like that child won't have the same understanding and experience and expertise that you do. So along the way of quote unquote raising that child, as it
Right,
relates to the metaphor of growing your business or growing this relationship with your client, there's just things that they don't understand, and they start throwing fits, and you're like,
right,
whoa,
right,
what's the problem? Like, what's going
right.
on here? You
Mhm.
know? So if that helps anyone, that's excellent. But that is my take on this topic.
Um, uh, yeah, I think the speaking of my son, give me 1 second, okay?
Yep.
Okay. Um, yeah, so I think that's a really good way to look at it, because if you're absolutely right, if the client actually knew how to do the work and the process of it all and the magic of it all, because it does look like magic when you're not the one that's doing it. Stuff just happens and it's the way you want it. Wow, look at that. It must be so
Right.
easy. You
Right.
made
You
it look
wake
so easy.
Yeah, you woke up to a
Right.
dollar under your pillow, your tooth fell out.
Right.
Right.
Amazing. I snap my fingers and the copy's written, right? And it's perfect. Uh no, man, it's a lot of it is, you're absolutely right. So that's why I'm so big on education. And I'm so big on training. Because once this client starts learning the information of what I have had to spend years learning and downloading into my brain, I know that human being is going to be better off because of it, you know? And I think a lot of miscommunication tends to stem from misunderstandings. And when there is a misunderstanding and a knowledge gap, that's when people start having confrontation. It's because they don't know. One person doesn't understand what the other person is really going through or what they're actually trying to convey. And so stuff gets interpreted incorrectly and causes bigger problems, which goes back to controlling your emotions. So you don't sound harsh when you say something. So you sound like you're actually trying to help, or you're genuinely curious. You're trying to solve their problem. You're not trying to get into a fight with them or battle them on something. I always want my prospects to know, and especially when they become clients of mine, dude, we're on the same team. I am here to support you. I'm here to do business with you and watch you thrive and make money and be successful and be happier in life and take care of this issue you're dealing with. That's what I'm here for. I'm not here to make stuff more complicated for you. So I want you to learn more about what I know and what I'm doing back here when I'm working on your copy, or I'm trying to coach you through your sales strategy, or I'm diagnosing your marketing gaps that you have and why leads aren't coming to you or they're not qualified, for you or whatever. So yeah, a lot of the I guess we can end with that. A lot of the miscommunication, they stem from misunderstandings.
Street smart sales. Street smart sales.